The history of the world. What's mything? Before we start, here is a health warning. If you prefer to believe in ancient Bronze Age mythology, even though you live in the 21st century, then we should part ways here, because our evolutionary story which is about to unfold will only confuse you and lead to stress. Most people love mythology in one form or another. We all have our own favourite myths and legends, but mythology is a subject in its own right, a human psychological process that has its origins embedded in the evolution of our species. We are a strange animal and an oddity in quite a few ways. In the fossil record, what demonstrates the path towards humanity was long thought to be the size of our brain, but in recent years that idea has been set aside by a more crucial first step on the road to being us, and that is bipedalism. Yes, it turns out that it is not in the brain case of the skull that we look for the bones of our early ancestors, but in the jointing of the hips. What is more, it would appear the early ideas that we started to stand upright when those ancestors left the trees is also now set aside. Our standing posture appears to have been present before we climbed down to the ground. Our cousins in the great ape family, of which we are a part, the orangutan, lives in the trees standing on two legs in what is now thought to be a similar manner to the early precursors of us. Unlike the orangutans, we left the trees and the nourishment of leaves, nuts and fruit to take up a more energy-rich meat-based diet. This, together with our upright posture, led to the development of our larger brains. In all animals, survival is what life is all about. Making it through long enough to pass down our genetic coding through the generations. One of the features which definitely separates us from the majority of the animal kingdom is how we chose to develop our cognitive process as the key component of a survival strategy. There are other animals with demonstrable self-awareness, but as far as we know, there's no other animal which has developed that facility of mind with the astonishing depths and capabilities we now possess. The way we think has seen the animal Homo spread around the world and live in all environments from ice tundra to desert. Our abilities of the mind are so extraordinary that we can even survive in space, an environment which means instant death to any other animal from Earth. In this ability to conquer environmental challenges lies one of our other differences to other animal forms. They adapt their bodies to the needs of the environment, whereas we adapt our environment to the needs of our bodies. There is no finer example to this than taking a survivable environment out into airless space. But where we are cold, we do not grow fur, but take the fur of others. Where we are hot, we construct shaded shelter. Where we can't see, we create light. To some extent, other animals can and do adapt environment, but our cities and spaceships define the extent to which we are different to them. All of this cannot happen without the development of our minds, the reliance on our ability to think our way past barriers and our capacity to imagine solutions to problems. Crows can create complex four-part tools. Gorillas can build bedding platforms, and chimpanzees have complex social structures with language, but only humans are capable of conceptual art. Our imaginations are the most powerful survival tool yet devised on planet Earth, but it is an evolutionary strategy which comes with a heavy price. To be this imaginative, we have to be self-conscious to and beyond the extent that we realise our own mortality in an immediately profound way. We humans all know and understand that we are going to die, and that will be the end of that self-awareness. Even stating this fact here should rouse a level of discomfort. Such is our awareness of the fact, and we mostly try to set it aside from day-to-day thinking. There is good reason for this looking the other way, because we all have to admit, spending time worrying about our own mortality is truly depressing. As we all know, depression is what we call in our Western medical mythology a form of mental illness. Here was the worm in the apple of knowledge, the animal which developed huge cognitive powers in order to survive, found that the self-awareness which came along with such a strategy could lead to mental collapse. In the words of some great American social philosophers of the 20th century, what a bummer. But it gets worse. If the human mind manages to cope with the issue of its own mortality by whatever means, then the next question is, where are we? This is where the ever-inquiring human mind really comes up against it. Okay, so we live and we die, but where exactly is the place in which we do that living and dying? At the moment, in the 2020, the mythology of science is very busy developing all sorts of ideas on where we actually are, and, in keeping with the rules which govern all mythologies, yes, there are rules, and yes, we will get to them in these podcasts, they are drawing on the metaphors of the times, and some are starting to say, this place is all virtual reality. However, that doesn't tell you where we are, it just tells you what we are in. And it all starts getting very complicated after that. When the flourishing self-awareness can't say where it actually exists and knows its self-awareness will disappear in death, then you have a recipe for psychosis, the complete collapse of the functional ability of the brain to sustain and support consciousness, severe mental derangement resulting in delusions and loss of contact with external reality. Don't worry though, because those smart and clever little creatures, Homo, worked out a creative solution to that problem. One of the facilities their development of mind as a survival strategy had given them was imagination. When it got cold, they built a fire. Where you can't breathe, they took air. Where they had unanswerable questions which could undermine the whole structure of their being, they mythologized. There is no answer? Hey, let's just make one up. These early Homos didn't just guarantee the continuing survival of the brain strategy, but they laid the foundation for advertising and marketing. We don't get everything right. Where the answers are missing, then start mything. Create stories which explain what life is all about. Utilising that huge capacity for imagination, create a metaphorical solution to any insurmountable physical problem. We may have started out as creatures developing the cognitive thinking process, and we may have believed in the past that it was the brain size rather than upright walking which started us off. But what really made us who we are was when we started to create mythologies. And the evidence is that human beings have been doing that for a very long time. There are two final points to consider before I bring this section to a close. The first being that you will have noticed that I have kept using the word Homo rather than human being or Homo sapiens. The reason for this is that up until recently, we were not the only species of Homo on the planet. Whilst the early mythologies of evolutionary thinking held that only we Homo sapiens were highly evolved consciousnesses, and the others were desperate brutes, so-called cavemen, just about able to lift a club, recent research has demonstrated that these other Homos had similar self-awareness to us, created art, and there is enough evidence to suggest they also mythologized, especially now we know they had language. The second point is, you will note that I have used terms like mythologies of evolutionary thinking and mythologies of science, and you may be wondering if I'm saying that everything is a mythology. The answer to that question is an emphatic no. Everything is not a mythology. What we are engaging in here is an understanding of what mythology is, how it works, how it is structured, and considering a method of analysis based on a mythological perspective. Why is this important, fascinating, absorbing, and even exciting? Well, because if we cannot tell the difference between mythology and history, if we are confused by the distinctions between science and mythology, then we could be on the road to psychosis. One good look around you at the world today may suggest to you that there are a lot of people about who cannot tell the difference between mythology and reality. And the big question is, do you really want to be like them? Welcome to Mythology's podcast, a place where the expansion of imagination and perception is never limited by mythology, but enhanced by its understanding.